Hi folks, what's up? It's 2025 and I have a sassy new haircut for the new year. It's been a while since I've posted an episode because I've been busy with working as well as having software issues. Anyway, it's all a 2024 thing now and we're moving into 2025 with a brand new episode that's all about being BIPOC and how that impacts your mental health. What? Being BIPOC impacts your mental health in both good and maybe not as great ways. So for this fun and cozy conversation, we meet in Katrina Esguerra's living room. And as she welcomes us, me and Aliocha Abdoh, an educator, as well as Arya Afshar, who is a musician. All of my friends are also comedians and advocates for trans rights, gender rights, as well as BIPOC rights. We share some really touching stories about how our families had to fight or to struggle in order to move to another country. We share about what it feels like to be the global majority who end up being minorities in our adopted countries. We share about imposter syndrome and why that especially impacts those of us who are BIPOC. And we also talk about love and what love is when you're living with all of these layers. So I think it's a really awesome episode. And also maybe the sound is not the best because there's a lot of us and we were just learning how to get that one microphone to serve all of us on a hot summer day. But the content is worth it and I'm excited to hear what your thoughts are about it. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Let's jump into it. Maybe we can all introduce ourselves.
Go first. I'm Kat. I studied design, but we all met each other through comedy. I'm like, is it toxic? I don't know. Doing arts and design, comedy stuff.
I go next. What am I? I do audio things, a lot of sound and music and audio-based things. I also do comedy. That's how I know everybody here.
My name is Aliocha.
It's funny to know how all this...
They're trying to silence you. Actively fighting. No, I'm joking. I'm a teacher and basically between teaching and stand-up, it's just, all coping with laughter. What are we even coping with? What is it?
What is the What is the monster that we're kind of battling?
Colonialism.
Yeah.
Yeah. Capitalism. Expectation.
Internalized.
Racism.
Cultural. Social expectations.
Comedy is the only place that I've ever worked in truly unmoderated. You can make music, but a bunch of people have to approve of your things, to put you on the radio, put you in a playlist. Stand-up is like, I don't have any bandmates. I don't have a manager. It's me. If I approve my jokes, obviously the audience has to laugh or I'll drop the joke. Sometimes when people don't laugh at my jokes, it gives me more conviction that it's like really funny. If people are like really mad about it.
It's kind of very freeing as a person of color because it's like no one is moderating me. Maybe, I don't know if this is healthy, but like the more crazy you are, like the more it's celebrated. So
I think we can also take or gauge a lot of where culture is at by looking at which comedians are successful versus which ones are not. But on the other hand, for people who are perhaps not mainstream, it's still a very freeing space to just kind of communicate your truth.
100%.
Yeah, and to differentiate. I think for us, we're kind of exploring sexuality, being BIPOC, and being really real about things that I think in general in society, it's not as easy to just, like you said, go to a cafe and be, talking about these things. So I think that's the difference because there is, like you said, mainstream and such. And then there is like, give me like a BIPOC one.
We love Julio Torres.
Call Marito Lopez to name a local person, right?
Yeah, Tin Lorica here. Yeah. Actually, Sean Devlin is getting out there. Anyway.
Right.
Right. Yeah, this naturally evolved to already talking about comedy. So let's. So why have we found it necessary even like to go to this place of being unmoderated and be creative that way? Because I mean, to a lot of people, I think stand-up comedy is like, oh, you have a microphone and you have. It's not like doing a painting or a sculpture or poetic. I don't know. Yeah. So what drew you there, or what made you desperately find your way there?
I was kind of triggered by that question, not in a bad way, but I'm just like, ooh, like definitely from not being heard. Like,
Yeah.
I think not only that, but I think especially like as a person of color or any type of marginalized person, if you like criticize the system that is marginalizing you, people aren't receptive to it because a lot of people feel attacked by it. If somebody is white and you're talking about being oppressed by a white supremacist system, a lot of times they tend to take offense in that, even though the offense is not intended to them as a person. In fact, you're kind of trusting them, and that's why you're telling them stuff.
Yeah.
But so comedy is almost like the burden of being funny or the burden of making your complaints and criticisms entertaining falls on you. So like if I make a joke out of this and make people laugh, they're less likely to have that like defensive reaction.
And maybe don't think about it.
Yeah, I think that's
Happen. Actually, I don't know if you have all watched on Netflix, Outstanding, and then there's a documentary about it. So like Lily Tomlin and these wonderful queer stand-up comedians coming out to talk about why they even made this special. And they were saying that comedy is bullet and bomb. So like, you put the bomb on, you make people laugh, and then the bullet is like your truth speaking. And it actually really touched me. It made me realize that I didn't even know why I was getting into comedy, but it made me feel like, oh, the next thing I write, I want to be more kind of trying to say these things. How does it feel when you write something that has that impact for you?
Sorry, I was just thinking recently I've been trying to maybe unlearn sort of, like you were saying, like forcing people, not forcing, but packaging in a way so they understand and find it funny. But I feel like right now I kind of want to unlearn that a little bit and be less, I don't know, be more truthful to myself. Yeah, like, and not be too worried about how maybe like a white audience will perceive my joke. And just being, I really liked how this one comedian just like outright said this like very anti-capitalist joke, and it was very funny. It was like very unhinged, and she wasn't worried about what the audience was going to think, and it still landed so well. So I was thinking about that with like the racial component.
That's huge.
People tell me like you can't joke about genocide. You shouldn't joke about genocide. And I'm like, no. You shouldn't do genocide. You can joke about genocide as much as you can. This is a whole different type of bombing I'm doing right here.
What is something you might want to share with us about putting your voice out there?
Okay, so one of the people that has influenced me a lot, it's normal, is my dad. Because growing up, like it's interesting when you're a person of color and you grow up, especially in a very like white centric space, and it's impossible to like not know that you're a person of color. So it's like white kids don't grow up with their dad saying like, oh, where are you from? Oh, we're from Iran, the bad guys in movies. So like my dad at a very early age in my memory would be like saying, oh, we're from Iran, the bad guys in movies. So it's like kind of very pointed, but like framed as a joke. And at an early age, I was repeating that to people. And I think I would have been like 8 or 9. And people were like, 8 or 9-year-old being like, what?
Oh my God.
I'm the bad guys in movies. I've grown up seeing my dad just like he's not a native English speaker. And just the way that he interacts with like the white population, one thing growing up was like very clear is he's the way in which white people do not understand him fully. And yet he just like talks and talks and talks. I get it from somewhere. And it's like interesting to like kind of see his wit, because he is witty, he's funny, but how it doesn't land with a Canadian audience, and how he's able to like intellectualize and then turn it to humor. And so I think like when you're a child of immigrants, especially immigrants who are not very white passing, you almost like become that bridge between your parents' generation and their culture, but then you make it more palatable to a Canadian audience, and it's like a whole thing. And it's like Canadians will understand me, white Canadians, English-speaking Canadians will understand me and find me palatable. But how many steps removed I am from my dad? Not that many. It's just how you present yourself.
And that joke is a defense mechanism too.
Yeah.
I'm sure that your dad developed because you kind of own like the stereotype, or you kind of own like what worries people about Iranians back in the day.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So it's like I like getting ahead of the game.
Such as the fan.
An Iranian man in Kansas like during the time of 9/11. Like,
Yeah.
how fun would that have been?
Exactly.
Probably very. And like all the kinds of things that were probably said to him about him, like in a very white town.
Right. And to still carry yourself with pride, right? And knowing that, you chose to leave your culture. I mean, I think all of our ancestors, maybe that, or
Not mine, but yeah,
Right.
mine tried. They tried in '87 before I was born to migrate to Canada back in the day pre 9/11. If flying was a joke, it was like getting on a bus. So you would get a flight to Cuba from Iran that would have a stopover at like Frankfurt. Then at Frankfurt, a smuggler would meet you and you would just exchange boarding passes and they would go to Cuba and then fly back. And then you would take their boarding pass, which was to a connecting flight to Canada, and you would just go to Canada. On the airplane, you would tear your passport up and you would seek asylum. But they got robbed in Lebanon on their way to Italy. And so like they lost all the passport and all the money and then they came back. So you tried.
But they tried.
They tried.
Yeah.
If I can share about how my family came,
Yeah, please.
because my family's from my dad's side of the family's from Iran. So
And your
like,
mom?
Switzerland, as like different circumstances. One of them is like fully a choice, and the other one, like, yeah, it's a choice, but it was like because it was right before the Iranian Revolution, like probably around the time people were like, either we stay and we stick it out and weather this storm, or people who like were financially well off had the privilege of saying, well, maybe we weather this storm from somewhere else. That's the subgroup my dad's side of the family would have been in. So he would have only been like 7 or 8 when he left. And I just like grew up in like a bunch of different areas. Like grew up in Spain, France, Switzerland, London, Canada, and like just like bopped around like a lot. So it's like when you're a person of color and then you're like always bopping around from place to place, culture is like a really strange.
Yeah, it's hard to quite literally root yourself.
No roots.
Yeah.
No root. And then like there's like the idea of like the culture in which you are, but then the culture in which you are in at home. So I don't know if you guys relate to this one, but it's like the idea that like, okay, so in my Middle Eastern family, it was like, okay, sure, you're in Canada, but those are Canadians. At home, don't forget you're Middle Eastern, you're Persian. This is what we expect of you. The rules are not the same.
Yeah.
So it's that dual identity.
Absolutely.
No, totally. No, I had the same experience, but just thinking about like another layer of that where it's like because you're so removed from like your literal motherland, you really have no concept of what's even normal in that culture. So it's like your only point of reference are your parents. And so it was like, it's only just now that I'm reconnecting with other Filipino people. And I'm like, oh no, that was definitely just like a my family thing. I thought this was a Filipino thing the whole time. This is not normal, actually.
Can you give me an example? It sounds funny.
Like, well, for example, it is funny for me just recently, like sort of identifying as autistic. Definitely my dad has like markers of like autism. So I'm like, some of like those societal quirks. I'm like, maybe this is like a Filipino thing. I was like, no, this is just like a dad thing. Like, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And for us, this is the extra labor of having to differentiate these things. It's like, am I this way because of my culture? Am I this way because it's me or because of my dad or mom? Like navigating all of that mix, I think I hate actually like umbrella terms, but okay, BIPOC. It just makes being not mainstream, so-called, but global majority, extra work. So do you feel like existing is extra work?
Yeah, because there's the intersectionality of everything. Folks who don't see themselves as racialized or are not treated as such, everyone already has issues. But yeah, being part of a racialized community just adds those extra layers, and then maybe add like your neurodivergency. So it builds up. It's a lot.
Yeah. And, I don't think I learned how to account for that or to give myself like grace for that until much, much later, even only after I started working in mental health. I think before that, I was always kind of like, I'm just not trying hard enough. And, like, what's wrong with, me and my lack of, blah, 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 blah. But now meeting so many people who are actually so wonderful, so talented, so funny, so kind. And I'm like, oh, wow, it's just some of us, we have these extra layers. Yeah. And I'm curious in terms of how it impacted even that feeling of imposter syndrome, right? Because you were saying that comedy stemmed from not being heard. And now you're going to make people hear you.
Yeah.
Resonate with that. And what about, you and you guys, like, what do you feel like about being heard or not being heard? in terms of like family or society.
I like that. I'm a big yapper, but it stems from like the fact that my dad's the biggest yapper. The final boss yapping. That space, it's like your voice is just not your voice, your experience, and perspectives, nothing. Like it's like you're actually existing. It's not super healthy. Lots of love there, but not super healthy. Where you're like, my only role is to be receiving this person's messages over and over and over again. And I think something I did, like maybe subconsciously very early on, was like, if I'm in this dynamic, this power dynamic essentially, where it's very much like top down at home, I'm not recreating this structure within my friend groups, within my romantic relationships. Like never again will I be the one who's like receiving other people's perspectives, and I have to just like quietly like take it, listen. And then it's like, that's why I think it's like a defense mechanism where I don't have a problem being heard, but it's like maybe a little bit too much sometimes when I'm like, oh, actually, I'm over compensating. Thank you. Compensating from like a past trauma, which I say past trauma, present trauma. Yeah, is it still affecting you currently? Yes, present. Grammar, it's important.
In a way, you're kind of the balancing factor, right? In terms of like, over here, we're like, oh, like having a voice, like that's hard. And you seem like you have a voice. But even you have that extra layer, actually, of all these, kind of things that were impressed on you by your dad. So when you're interacting with friends and in relationships, there's still that feeling of actually you're doing this work of self-moderating and, feeling like, is this too much? Is this too little? I mean, it would be great if the whole world was also doing that. But we live in this world where some people are very self-conscious, or even if they don't seem to be, and then other people are totally unconscious.
Yeah. What I always feel like, I always say this, like the people who need therapy the most never go. Like, well, I'm not going to say we, but when I go to therapy, I'm mostly talking about stuff that's been done to me. Or if it's like a way that I'm feeling, or like a trait that I have that's impeding, even imposter syndrome, it comes from an external place, not like something that I was born with, obviously, not that something that I was raised to believe. I think like with imposter syndrome, a lot of Iranians have this. And I always think this, I'm like, why did I get out? I have friends who are smarter than me, more talented than me, who worked harder than me, who got stuck there. Like circumstances were different. Like, why me? Like the only reason was I had parents who like believed in me. So when I was like, I wanna leave and be a musician, they were like, sure. Whereas most like Iranian parents would be like, musician, go get an engineering degree, right? So that's an imposter syndrome thing. It always comes from like the people who don't go to therapy that make you need to like spend half of your paycheck on therapy.
I had some breakthroughs in therapy, like myself as a client, realizing that I guess like with my dad, I feel like, oh, I wish that this person knew how to communicate with me or to love me. But then, even though you know why you're feeling the way you are, even though you know why you kind of don't feel like you deserve or own however talented or able you are, because, you grew up with family that don't quite believe you're worthy. But then I actually was doing some EMDR, which is like a bilateral stimulation.
What's it short for?
Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So I actually provide that as well. But basically, with the bilateral stimulation, you're distracting yourself while you're thinking and feeling about the issue. And it's kind of like REM eye movement.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're rearranging and retrieving even things that are disorganized in terms of, sometimes trauma makes you stuck in one part of your brain. So all of a sudden, it finally organically emerged for me, like beyond talking about it, that actually, I have compassion suddenly for this father who would, be like a bit physically abusive. Because I realized in that moment of looking at this very distressing image of what happened, he needs therapy. So it's like I went to retrieve my child self, but at the same time, I was like, this man actually is the one that needs therapy. And then all of a sudden, that opening happened, and I was like, wow, like it did make me feel like I was breathing differently. By the same token, I think until we can get beyond surviving, right? I mean, it does take time and yes, sometimes money, or like, somebody willing to give you like a big discount to go do this kind of self-supporting, loving thing. I think therapy this is a bit of a tangent, but really it's just somebody being with you while you figure things out and you feel safe enough to figure it out. Because I think we are actually all whole. seriously and complete and amazing. Except we don't really believe it because we have been lied to or conditioned or things happen. And it's more like leaning into trusting yourself again and removing like the stuff that's in the way. But even for me, like recording the podcast, like the first 5 minutes, I'm always nervous because it's like that whole imposter syndrome thing, right? Yeah. But the truth is, you know, once we all meet and share and talk about it, I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing this already.
Yeah. And we're doing this together.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. You started it with saying that it's from not being heard. Like, what would you want to share about that?
Yeah, like I guess on top of like the racial component, also being like socialized female or AFAB, there's that added element of not being heard within the family system. But at the same time, maybe recently it's given me more power. I don't know if this makes sense, but it's like, if no one cares what I'm doing, then like why I should just put myself out there. And I don't know, that resonates with folks.
I hear you.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, even if I fail, you know, these people that I had wanted to care, they're gonna do their own thing and not care anyway.
Yeah.
So, like, what if I did this for me?
Yeah.
Then what's
Exactly.
gonna happen? It's like there's something.
Yeah, because also no one's gonna do it for me. Like, so yeah. So I guess that in a way that was somewhat liberating, realizing that.
Well, your comedy is so funny, and
Thank you.
yes, like actually really unique. So I want to say, like, you know, you have this joke about your family's like straight pride.
Oh, yeah.
Turn around and be like, haha, like actually, you know, you guys are funny. You know, we were all sharing a little bit stories about our families having to actually navigate some pretty hard stuff in order to, you know, escape or not escape. Our home countries were places of strife as well. Sometimes it's like when I realized that my grandfather was like a rickshaw puller.
What?
Yeah. And my grandmother, she was almost dragged out from, like, she was hiding under the bed when the Japanese soldiers came to China, and, you know, she would have been raped. And so instead of her being raped, like, they were pulling at her leg, but the soldier was called away. So then my grandmother was immediately married off to the closest whoever, you know, older man who was widowed was nearby. And that's kind of how the family happened. Like, they moved from China and escaped to Macau and into Hong Kong and Singapore. So, I mean, our families have been through a lot as well. And sometimes I feel like their trauma
Down? Oh, for sure.
their resilience as well. But, you know, yeah. And how do you feel like that impacts us? And also, like, you know, how have you been navigating that?
I think it's hard to say, to sort of look at it from an outsider perspective, because what I experienced seems so normal. But yeah, like it has been passed on because my parents were similarly went through colonialism in the Philippines. And I think maybe just my generation now, healing has just started to happen because my parents are quite traditional, but they have always been very supportive of the choices we make. So maybe that's the generational healing. Yeah. There's still like issues here and there, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's beautiful. I mean, like, we all have families that are not perfect, but also they do overall, they're showing love, right, in their ways as well. And I feel like a lot of healing comes from that, being able to incorporate and accept that it's like, you know what, shit happened to you. And thanks for loving me, you know, the best way you could.
The way I interpreted it was like understanding that parents become parents and they don't get a rule book and how to do it properly, and all they have is like their previous models. Hopefully, like we improve with every generation and are less traumatized. But, like, then there's also like external factors like wars and shit like that. And was my dad perfect? No, but also looking at his models of parents, is it surprising how he decided to raise us? And then when you look at my grandfather's father and vice versa, like I just know it like trickled down and then like now and now it's us. And it's like, though I can disagree with certain choices, I can still find the empathy and care to be like at least understanding. And when you understand, then you can also like hopefully, if I ever have kids, like I don't know, feelings will be valid or valid, so that kind of stuff. But like it's just like with every generation, hopefully it gets better with their
Well, or just with, you know, friendship, healing, community.
Yes.
Yeah, like care, realizing that we're worth caring, even from within ourselves.
I'm also like at an age where like I just turned 34. By the time my parents were 34, like I was 3 years old, my sister was 9 years old. So, and I think of like if in my current state of life I had 2 kids, I would not be providing for them materially. I would probably not be providing for them emotionally much because I wouldn't have the capacity. I would have my own stuff to deal with. And so I think about like my parents, like they grew up in one system and then had to adapt to a new system and like had to go through like a war that like lasted longer than World War II. The war between Iran and Iraq like started in 81, ended in 90. Right? They went through all of that and they had 2 kids at my age where I feel like I need like a day off after this. Like, you know, like it puts things in context. And my parents, not that my parents did anything even that bad. I think I uncovered recently that my parents knew only to provide materially, and they did. And it wasn't that they were emotionally abusive in any way. It's just like they didn't know that when I'm like, as a 4-year-old flipping out and like breaking stuff because I'm angry, to like be like, okay, here's how you work with that, right?
I think that's a common
It's a very,
experience. Like your parents are already struggling because, you know, global majority always undergoes some sort of form of colonialism. Like we're all struggling globally here. So it's like that emotional support isn't always the most present.
And like they're giving you like material things that they think if they had, like they would have been happy. If you have to think about, oh, will I eat tonight? You're not going to think about like, oh, what's my sexuality? Like, how do I express my, you know, like you're not getting to that level.
Because like also like showing a child emotional care, that also takes some emotional work on your side with
100%. Exactly.
your parent.
Yeah.
So it's like they're giving what they're able to at that time because they don't even understand the whole emotional thing. But then you understand it now, which means like with the next generation, in theory, not only will we be cared for materialistically, but like, you know, different values, but also like emotionally, we have that space. Some things are just more tangible, like a roof, food, clothes, material goods. Like you want an instrument, here you go. Like that's very materialistic, tangible. Then get it to you. Oh, what do you need emotionally?
Like hearing you say that, if I were to have a child now, I'd be more equipped to deal with their emotions. But materially, if you need an instrument, get the hell out of here.
It's like the post like millennial Gen Z kids. They're like, yeah, my parents were so healthy emotionally, but you know, couldn't get me a PS46.
Do you feel like the values that we think are important are kind of from within ourselves, or is it kind of from orienting to what's around us?
Growing up in Canada and being like, there's not that many people of color.
Hmm.
When I grew up there, I remember being a kid and thinking very often how could I get in trouble for like very minor things. I was a good kid, and every time I get in trouble, I'm like, oh man, you don't even know white parents are. So I think it's like our models for, or like my model for like what would have been like a happy childhood is like rotating around like not only like the white cultures that we're exposed to, but also it's not white cultures because it's not a monolith, and there's a great diversity. But what's not very diverse is the representation as on television of white families and white picket fence and joy and family and childhood. Like that's actually pretty limited in terms of like representation.
The TV shows about people of color, like families, like fresh off the boat and stuff like that. Even in a lot of the jokes that, you know, people do on stage, you know, you make fun of, oh, my dad's like this, my mom's like this. And then, but the truth is, I feel like we're still modeling it on this external, they would have been so liberated, like they would have been. But then it's like, is that just like white, you know, kind of general values that we have been told is better, you know, versus it's like maybe, you know, you were saying that back in Turkey, right, people would think you are a very calm person, right, versus in Canada, like all of a sudden things become different because it's always about what you're next to, yeah, and whether or not you feel like you fit or you don't fit.
I think you do model yourself, and even like as somebody who's lived in multiple different countries, my model has changed. Like when I was an Iranian kid, I was one way, and then when I was a kid like living in Turkey, I was another way, and now like in Canada, I'm like, and it's about like what I'm seeing around me, and it's almost like you want to be like other people because being an outlier is like a little uncomfortable, you know, and you stand out, so there's more like a heat on you. Right? If you're like the only person of color in your class.
So it seems like we've been trying to fit into a definition of success that might not feel organic to us, right? And actually, as we talk, I feel like I'm getting tired. So being BIPOC can be extra tiring. I'm going to like resist by lying down and like, whoever wants to lay down or not. Yeah. So what is success anyway for each of us here nowadays?
Well, can success change over time? Do people like really sit down and like identify what is success to me? Like what is the end goal? I think that takes a lot of, what's the word I want?
Self-reflection and time.
Yeah. Like it's not that simple, right? We're like, we might want to do something, we might create, like we might have a desire, and I'm bad at this. Slowing down and thinking, okay, but like where is this need coming from? What's the objective goal? And like I think it's something I learned when I was like pretty young about how like different people have different blueprints of what success looks to them, or values. They're basically just value. Does that marry up well with the people around you? And I think, okay, for me, when I'm around people who have more similar values to me, values of like what their life should look like, the spaces that they want, that's when I feel the best. So I'll know that like I've been successful if I'm getting closer and closer to like the future I imagine for myself, where I'm at peace with my life.
I agree with that. Like for me, it's also more of a kind of checking in feeling, because I feel like I can get really caught up in thinking and then convincing myself that what I thought is what I really think. But when I check into like, do I feel at peace with this, right? We're all wired to need each other, actually. So I think the more we try to move away and be successful by our individualistic selves, which is again a very Western model.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think the more I check in with myself, the more I realize is like, no, actually, I would like to be very basic and very simple and very like loved and loving. And to me, that's more successful or in line with my values. And I think it's worth taking the time and the kind of shared spaces to co-discover these things.
I've had to definitely reevaluate success. I don't know if it's by force or like just by I guess maybe by the nature of my body. Yeah, just because having health issues, like I'm realizing that I'm neurodivergent. So yeah, reevaluating success that way and realizing what's unhealthy. Yeah, because my body's telling me what is.
Yeah,
I
agree, because I also realized that I'm neurodivergent. I finally, after working with so many people who are neurodivergent, was like, I think I am too. Got diagnosed and then realized that, and also cancer survivor. It's like, I think it's a big part of being BIPOC and Chinese female to deny your body. Right. And then so now it's like, actually, what if I embrace or listen to this, or at least orient from this is my so-called capacity.
Yeah.
But even within this capacity, there's so much creativity and joy doing this and putting it out there versus thinking that I have to, do the like workshops that I used to do and all the coordinating. It's like, I want this to just go out free into the world. Yay. But it's enough for me.
Yeah.
So checking kind of what's real for you.
Yeah. Being truthful with your body. And I think it's successful to not be totally exhausted by the end of the week.
Right.
That's so true.
I'm wondering, because we're talking about success, I'm like, where does that idea of success come from? Like, does it feel like a chase? And I'm wondering if like the idea of success is like somewhat linked to capitalism.
Oh, definitely.
100%.
Or like, wait, like why am I always chase? It's like, it always feels like a chase. And if we're not chasing the next thing, and I'm guilty of this, I know, because I need to slow down, is like, if we do like slow down and reflect, then we realize, oh wait, I'm actually already successful. Like when I look at the space that I share with my students, with my friends with kids, like I'm really good with kids, and I'm really proud of myself. And like, to me, that is success. And it does not need to feel like a chase. It just means like you can just like sit back and watch what you've accomplished just naturally and be like, actually, like just keep going like this. I'll be happy.
Right. Sorry, just going off of the, where does success come from? Yeah, I think it's definitely capitalism, colonialism, because I think of places like the Philippines where there's really like less hunger for fame. It's more about community, and maybe like the most hungry for fame I've seen people is like, who's the best karaoke singer at the bar? Like,
Nice.
And even then, like, it's so different from here.
I think like the individualistic like culture we're talking about, and overall in capitalism in the West, what success really means in the end, you can't achieve that level of success without fucking somebody over. Or, like I inherited this money from my parents who lived in a system that gave them a lot of preference and gave them a lot of opportunities. They denied a lot of people of color, right? Like house loans weren't given out to Black families. So that's why Black millennials are less likely to have inherited a home, whereas white millennials are more likely to have inherited a home. But so our ideas of success, whenever it's individual, even the idea of escaping capitalism or escaping the noise of the city is in a way like leaving your fellow humans behind for your own sanity. So now my idea of success is like, let's burn some things to the ground. To me, like success is if I'm assassinated. Let's go. Because think of all the people who were assassinated. They were all onto something, right? Malcolm X, Martin Luther King.
Right.
They were close to something.
Value.
Yeah. And they had to be like stopped. I want the people I'm fighting to think we need to shut this kid down. And then I'd be like, I have done something. That's the like litmus test. Because if they're letting you talk, you're not doing anything.
That's a lot to put on yourself because,
True, yeah.
those figures were rooted in community and they were
Right.
they were targeted because actually capitalism likes to attribute community work to one person. It was a community because they want to see an icon, they want to see a representative, they want to shut it down, but you can't shut down.
Yes.
Shutting down one person doesn't mean you're shutting down
Go
good
back to your health thing. Like people
Yeah.
just need to kind of push like some kind of brand, right? Versus actually I agree with you that the system needs to change. And then it's like, how do we do it together? Versus feeling like, I need to be killed. Well, I think what we individually believe and feel driven by when we reflect on it, right, always reveals like actually there are bigger truths behind it. And I think what you want is the world to be a better place and a less selfish place, which it is. And then it's just like, how can we do it together so that, it's not so much on one person. Like even Mother Teresa was pretty depressed. Her diary was actually like a hot mess. So basically, like, let's not be like, a person putting ourselves on a cross. And
Yeah.
it's just, I think we all want this.
Yeah.
And I think the people who don't want it, they're confused.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about when you said how, like the stages of ascending through capitalism. And I guess, just what you were saying, like the highest form is like completely severing yourself from community and others.
Like success is like not changing the system, but being in a place where the system looks at you favorably.
And I just wanted to like add that BIPOC lens where it's like BIPOC people were already, I guess, successful socially because it's like a lot of us still live in community and that's, we don't need to listen to wider society and like chase those things. Like we're already so successful with when we have community.
I'm hearing like on one hand we're like the chameleons because we're all speaking English pretty well, right, together and communicating with that and with the mainstream so-called parts of society. But the truth is we also, I think, as time passes and we discover that some things were impressed on me and kind of broken. What about my own system, my own values, right? And then kind of orienting yourself more to what's authentic and true for you. And then discovering belonging in that as well. And I think it requires living and daring to like live and be hurt and fail and succeed, whatever, all of it to discover what's true for you. And I think like kind of sometimes being fearful and hiding in our shells, like none of us are like that here, but versus just, I think even daring to live is huge, regardless of what other people think.
Because I'm hearing people talk about like success and how it was always like it's often like monetary based or like based off of fame, things. But growing up, my model is very different, and I think that to me, it's still very different. Me, success has always been based in not so much community, and I've always felt super corny. It's like, I hate myself for already.
Your truth.
It's gonna be so corny. It's like success for me was always drama, but it's linked to just love. Like for me, it's like when you are your most honest self, and then you find those people who just do love you, and then you create spaces that are that. And so for me, like one of the things that I've always reach for is like genuinely connecting with people. And so when I care a lot. And then when I don't care, I'm like, get wrecked.
I'm like, that kind of sounds like community though.
Just found in community everywhere. Like I'm single. I've been
Mhm.
single for 5 years. And so like sometimes I can feel like I don't have capital LOVE. But if I slow down and reflect, I'm like, no, but I have so much lowercase love. Sorry, I'm gonna cry.
We love.
Being a teacher too, like I'm around like such sweet, kind kids who I think they haven't been hurt. And like if you're a good adult too, or a caring adult, you'll do whatever you can to also not perpetuate her. And so like for me, success is like lowercase love, like just really appreciating that. Oh yeah, and storytelling, like just being very happy with like the idea that we can share art and stories.
Yeah, people make babies and other people make kombucha in their closets. And they're both valid life choices. Yeah, so the reason you're all here tonight is because we really need to work together and get me maternity leave. Yeah. Actually making kombucha and having a baby are two very similar things. You guys, does anyone else here brew kombucha? Okay. Does anyone else here have a baby? Nice. Okay. I'm supposed to go on a trip to Peru. Except that I'm really hesitant to go because I need someone to look after my kombucha. Like you would not leave your baby with someone who's never had a baby before, right? Like, are you out of your mind? No.
Since I was little, like everything was just romance all the time. And I think it's like the absence of that in my actual childhood. Like it was like my parents are one thing and the kids were something else. Like it was not, we didn't have that like love as children. So I was like, it's weird when you're a child and you don't necessarily have that feeling of love. And you're like, what is that?
Right.
And like, I think some people, they're like, oh, what is love? And then they don't know how to do it. And then other people, me, are like, I don't know what love is. And therefore I'll just like put it everywhere.
I really know what you're saying. But like, first of all, we are all wired to need love. Like, that's why we're humans. Like, we're just kind of pack animals. And I think a lot of the pain that we experience is from being othered or exiled or, shunned or like shadowing ourselves, orphaning parts of ourselves, which sucks so hard. And it's what shows up, in therapy, like in myself when I feel like broken is because I am not able to get over whatever it is that's preventing like that connection. But I love how you're doing it. Like you're helping kids to reclaim their innocence, to feel safe in the world, to experience love, because you're their teacher, you're this generation. And I feel like we're all like in that in between from where our parents and their parents, right? They were in a certain time and under certain conditions. And now, even though our conditions are not perfect, I feel like even us showing up to try is really deeply amazing. And then I feel like whenever we heal, it's not only helping other people to heal, but like I feel like getting to have a relationship with myself, right? So that I am more able to be real. Because if I like me, then I'm not going to try so hard to make you like me, So I think that's what I'm getting from this. It's just like finding your people you can really unmask, right? And be vulnerable and brave, strong and crying and laughing with. Yeah, so that's what I'm getting from it in terms of what's my inner peace and outer peace. What am I doing with that?
I can share a moment of therapy, which is like I was talking to my therapist about like missing being in a relationship. I'm divorced for context. And as I was like explaining everything, like at one point my therapist stopped me and was like, so it doesn't seem like you miss your relationship at all. You miss everything around it. You miss that like your family is far from you, but your partner's family was like close and in your life, and you could like have like big family dinners together and go on family trips. Like it seems like that's actually what you're missing right now. So I think like in a way that lowercase love is better. It's more forever. The uppercase L is like there's so much pressure on it. It's arguable whether you should pursue it at all in your 20s because it's like a waste of time, et cetera, right? Like,
it's very Disney, right? Like the...
Exactly. Yeah. House. Like
it's Western.
House, partner.
I think people experience life, and especially heterosexual people, what strikes me is they walk around expecting it. Like, I deserve this. This
Yes.
something that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Also, like the the concept of the perfect partner, your twin flame, your soul.
Yeah.
I think the idea that if, and this is going to be like, again, super point, but if love is this beautiful, amazing thing, how dare we assume that like it's something that just happens to everyone? I think there's lowercase love and like we can like definitely build into it, but like the idea that you can like meet like a romantic, like a person that you fall, I don't think it's a given, and I don't want to live my life waiting for that. And so if we like stop expecting it and don't assume that everyone deserves it, well, everyone does deserve it. Entitlement. Everyone's deserving, but not every but you shouldn't act entitled to it because it's not necessarily gonna happen.
It's a whole host of factors.
Is it even real?
That's the thing. Like, I think we also have this idea again from movies and all that stuff that like there's like a checklist, and we will find a partner that takes all those boxes, and then we're like, oh, this is the perfect partner. Whereas like I feel like, and I may be a slut for this, but like I can get on a bus and fall in love with 10 people. Like not fall in love, but like be like any of these people. I can see myself like developing and growing. Yeah, then maybe the conversation would like ruin it. I don't know. It's like if you're attracted to men, that happens a lot more often. But like instead of thinking in terms of criteria, it's like if you feel like it's something that develops and grows, then if you like do the work, it kind of usually like it's easier than we're made to think if we don't see it as like a special once in a lifetime stars align kind of shit, but just as something that if two people are willing to cultivate a thing together, they'll probably manage to. We want to like practice every day and like jam out and write songs together and be open to each other's like weirdnesses, because like of course like
so they might be culturally different.
They listen to different music, like all of those things. But like if you work on it, then you become like a good band. And if you don't work on it, nothing comes out of it.
You have to work at it for sure.
Yeah.
I want to add something maybe to tie it more into like the BIPOC aspect, but it just reminds me of a lot of my friends' parents who still live in the global majority, like in their motherland countries. I think we've seen this as BIPOC folks, where it's like maybe our aunties and uncles don't have the perfect partner, but they are living like having the greatest time in their community. They literally have like a karaoke or like dance party every night. So it's like to put that emphasis on like one person, and that happens a lot here, is like very overwhelming.
And the importance of stepping back and recognizing how much love is just in community, and like it could be very, very small fleeting moments. But when you train yourself to look at it, like for example, it can be like a traffic control person like stopping to talk to like a mother and like a toddler and giving them a lollipop. I totally see that. And like I was on the bus and you just like look at life and you see people in moments of caring and like recognizing that's a moment of lowercase love. And I think that's why I'm saying like decentering like uppercase fireworks, maybe capitalistic, white-centric love, and more like other kinds of more quiet, more subtle, lowercase loves, which I'm not saying is pejorative, but like maybe undervalued in certain societies.
What are some rules of dating? What's that about? I shouldn't show up to their place of work unannounced. That's what they do in the rom-coms. And I shouldn't talk about politics on a first date. But of course I bring up politics every single time. It's because my tips are so great, I can't bear the idea of a conservative getting off of them. However, if you're NDP, you can titty fuck me right here. If you are a Green Party, we can do, and if you're an anarchist, anti-capitalistic, socialist, I'll ask to marry you. Any of those around? See, dating is hard. Yeah, because just existing, real talk, existing is political, no matter who you are. So we have to reflect that in our choices, and part of that is our dating choices. And I am all for someone disrespecting me in the bedroom. Actually, I insist on it.
It's been, this current week is reminding me that there needs to be balance of both listening to my body and being with my community, because it's also not great if we're that martyrdom where it's like, I want to give everything to myself, to the community, no matter what cost. Like, because like I have just like so much love to like pour into, especially because I volunteer with a lot of folks in the global majority, as they say, and Filipino folks. So I'm just like, I don't know, living in a very white suburban, I'm just like catching up. So yeah, just that's what's giving me joy, like finding that balance between seeing friends, community, and sort of, yeah, listening to my mind and body.
It's almost like the both like Western individualistic culture and then the very community-based like culture of like the Eastern, like Middle East, etc. They're both like a little wrong. Like in the Middle East, people love each other, super supportive. You're never alone. You're never like going through some shit alone. But then also your community like kind of finds your partner for you. You know what I mean? Like they're like, you married this. Yeah, exactly. You have no like privacy. How much do you weigh? You used to weigh less, you know? And that's your cab driver. I think maybe as BIPOC, we have more access to because we don't see like the individualism as the norm. And we know that like the other way isn't the norm. So we can like find our own kind of spice blend.
I think it's a healthy realization, actually. Like, even for me, I'm still learning it. It's just like boundaries are healthy. Boundaries make me happy. Boundaries are actually what's needed for me to be here fully and respect other people and myself. But I feel like for BIPOC people, it's pretty hard. Boundaries. It's like a whole journey.
Yeah.
I think I'll add, I think your body will tell you if you're around people that aren't making you feel like you're at peace and you're not able to be vulnerable around them. I used to be like around like a couple of friends and like they're not bad people, but I just remember like just feeling anxious around them all the time, or our values just simply didn't line up. So my values don't necessarily line up with people who are willing to make jokes about being bisexual during Pride Month and like, are not willing to be called out and like, you know, see an opportunity to be better. And during that time, I was experiencing like some anxiety, which I can mask fairly well, but it was still there. And I was uncomfortable. And I think it's like when you give yourself the ability to just say goodbye to something that's not meant for you, because that's scary. But like, you know, when you're not too attached and you're like, you know, this isn't working, I'm suffering, I have to say goodbye, you actually like open up space for other things that are right for you. So it's like when you like say goodbye to what's wrong for you, you leave space for what is right for you. And most people will show up and you can be like, whoa, I didn't know that I had this much love from people, and that's like awesome.
That's super awesome. So it's kind of like finding your people, but also kind of choosing who to let go of and who to let in.
Well, I think the people who are meant for you just they'll be there. Like you follow your passions and your honesty and your truth, and like the people will be there, but you can't find those people if you're attached to other people. So like enough,
You're not being yourself.
exactly.
People can't find literally you. Yeah.
True. So true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like what's missing and probably what's missing for like a lot of immigrant parents is like they left these like super established communities where they were somebody known and somebody that was known for a long time to come somewhere where like nobody knows them. And that's like such a hard adjustment. And I'm going through that adjustment and also kind of wondering like, okay, like immigrant parents do that so their kids would have a better life. Why am I doing it? I don't plan on having children. Like you owe nobody nothing and like
Almost like the freedom of getting to live for you.
then I realized like, oh, like the things that make me happy are like the simpler things that I already, like most of which I already kind of have.
I love that. And actually also, you know, with me and my partner suddenly kind of leaving everything behind and having to adjust to a new country altogether, I'm also really realizing that the things that I was kind of working hard for, right, in a way, it's like, you know what, actually, I like the work that I get to do, but I don't have to really like build, you know, how the trajectory would have been if I stayed here. And in a way, at first it was crushing, and then it became kind of liberating, because then it's like, what's the essence of this that I care about? And I realized that, again, having to live for yourself, right, becomes this thing where all of a sudden, like, I do hear and taste things differently and see things differently. And sometimes it's kind of like, oh, the world, like, can be so sparkly when you're not constantly, like, chasing all the things that you're told you have to chase to be enough. Yeah, so I think that's been kind of really cool. So, friends.
Thanks for having us.
Love you, people. I don't know how you would, like, wrap up a session like this.
This is usually where you say, this is sponsored by...
But the better question is it ever over?
The next episode where we talk about BIPOC and relationships. I think that we were kind of really fun.
Thank you. Later.
Wow, that was such a heartfelt episode. I am so grateful to Aliocha and Arya and Katrina for sharing their lived experiences, their observations, and for allowing me to share a little bit about how different methods have been helpful in moving forward from being trapped in some of those layers that are quite subliminal when you're somebody living as the global majority but minority in your adopted country, being BIPOC and being trans or being gay or queer is much more important nowadays for us to really feel empowered in our voices and to own who we are, and as well to take the time for self-care and for reflection on the pieces that impact how the world feels for us and how we navigate it. So anyway, I am really glad that we got to share this together. And please follow me and my friends. Our handles are in the show notes as well as on the screen. I'm at avalotherapy.com for booking any sessions or consultations, as well at avalotherapy for Instagram. I would love to hear your stories, your feedback. Email me, hit me up. Okay, sending everyone off with love. Take care. Bye. Happy New Year.